Hello and welcome. I'm Asavri Jindal and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. Israel announces temporary evacuation route for Gaza City residents via Salah al-Din Street, which will be open for 48 hours amid intense ground offensive. Meanwhile, the Israeli military announces humanitarian aid, which will enter northern Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirms airstrikes on Yemen's Houthi-Israel port targeting Houthi forces. In retaliation, Yemeni armed forces report launching hypersonic missiles and drones at Israeli sites, escalating the intense conflict between the two sides. US President Donald Trump arrives in the UK for a historic state visit where he confirms discussions on refining the US-UK trade deal. Speaking to reporters, the US President highlights the success of current trade agreements and emphasizes his commitment to improving economic relations. The suspect in the murder of Charlie Kirk appears in the court by video from jail as prosecutors seek the death penalty. Authorities reveal the suspect confessed in a hidden note, claiming he had enough of Kirk's alleged hatred. According to officials, an overnight Russian drone attack in Ukraine's Kirovohrad region partially cut power to the region's center and 44 settlements, disrupting railway services. Emergency teams fought fires at 3 sites with no casualties reported as recovery efforts are underway. Russian President Vladimir Putin oversees Belarus-Russia military drills with 100,000 troops as India and Iran join the exercise. The maneuver features nuclear-capable bombers and heavy artillery, highlighting growing defense ties and strategic cooperation among the nations. EU chief von der Leyen announces plans to accelerate phase-out of Russian fossil fuel imports after call with President Trump. The European Commission is set to unveil its 19th sanction package targeting crypto, banks and energy as a part of intensified efforts against Russia's war economy. Trump extends TikTok ban delay until December 16th as US-China trade talks continue. According to reports, both sides share interests in resolving the TikTok issue, with China pledging to review technology exports and intellectual property matters in accordance with the law. Israel has announced a temporary new route via Salah al-Din Street to allow residents to flee Gaza City, following the launch of an intense ground offensive and massive bombardments of the city's main areas. According to spokesperson Avinche Adre, the temporary route will remain open for 48 hours only. This comes after Israeli military spokesperson Efi Defrin confirmed that the ground offensive in Gaza City has begun, with additional troops expected to join soon. Defrin has stated that the objectives of the operation are to return of hostages and the defeat of Hamas, adding that the operation will continue until these goals are achieved. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has commented on Israel's actions, noting that Israel appears determined to carry out its military campaign up to the end. He also emphasized that Israel is not currently open to serious peace negotiations and warned that this position could lead to significant consequences from Israel's perspective. Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe Kotwala, Defence University, joins us from Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for joining us, speaking to us on NewsX World. I'd like to understand from you, Israel has announced a 48-hour transit route out of Gaza City. But given Israel's latest strikes in the Gaza City, how long will this mass displacement continue? And are we perhaps looking at a protracted war?
Yeah, I think now the international community simply sits between devil and the deep blue sea, because from one side, UN and legal experts like Navneet Pillai and all these legal fraternity keeps commenting that Israel is responsible for blatant violation of international humanitarian law, as the level of the human suffering has come to an unprecedented level. But they're providing this route, temporary route for 48 hours, simply emulates Israel's willingness to accept the basic norms in international humanitarian law as it clearly stands compatible with the Article 51 in the Geneva First Protocol that simply announces the providing fullest protection for the civilians in the times of the military operation going on. But from a practical point of view, we need to understand to which extent it can be applicable for the remaining the civilians, which is approximately 500,000 civilians stuck within the last stronghold of Hamas inside the city of Gaza. The IDF has clearly made its statement saying that more than 350,000 civilians have already been evacuated. They have fled Gaza. But still, there's 500,000 civilians who have been stuck inside Gaza. Now, it's going to be a kind of a huge problem for Israelis because the entire international fraternity, international world stands against them. You can clearly see that there has been accusation indicating the fact that Israel is responsible for the violation of the Genocide Convention of 1948. But at the same time, Netanyahu's government is completely adamant to carry out its military offensive in Gaza by intensifying all the ventures until they free the hostages, until they crush Hamas from the face of earth.
Right, absolutely. You know, Israel, of course, making it abundantly clear that this is something that is going to continue. They want their motive, their agenda to be fulfilled. How are you viewing essentially Israel's point of view at this point in time?
I've been to Gaza. I was in a state visit to Israel a couple of weeks ago, and I quite clearly saw from my own eyes the Israeli government handles the food distribution to Gaza, at least to a certain extent. But the food has been looted by the Hamas, the militants stuck inside Gaza. At the same time, if you look at the public opinion within Tel Aviv, within Jerusalem, or elsewhere in Israel, which clearly affirms that they somehow need to bring back their hostages. So Netanyahu has been internally and externally pressurized. So from military point of view, they already have finished the entire infrastructure system of Gaza, of Hamas. And they have targeted the key members of Hamas. And you know, the Qatari attack 2 weeks ago was completely shocking and detrimental in the long run. So now all they need is to finish the last remaining stronghold of Gaza, which will be the symbolic end of Hamas. At the same time, from Israel's point of view, they somehow need to stop Hamas from their every advantage, from their ability to executing terror as they committed on the 7th of October 2 years ago. So that is a kind of a strategic maneuver from Israeli side.
Right, absolutely. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us on NewsX World, sharing your perspectives. Meanwhile, we have some more news coming our way. An overnight Russian drone attack on Ukraine's central Kirovohrad region has caused significant disruptions, particularly and in fact partially cutting power and halting railway operations. According to Andrea Rekovich, the governor of Kirovohrad Oblast, the region's center and 44 settlements in the Oleksandrivka territorial community has been left without power. Emergency services responded to fires at 3 locations caused by the attack, though there have been no reported casualties. Meanwhile, in a separate incident, a fire at fuel storage facilities near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, reportedly caused by Ukrainian shelling, has been successfully extinguished. According to reports, the fire was contained before it could spread to nearby fuel tanks, preventing a potentially catastrophic escalation at the site. Joining us at this point in time is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, Senior Strategic and Defense Expert, joining us from India. So thank you so much for your time on NewsX World. And I'd like to understand from you, when we talk about this particular region, there was an attack that took place in March as well, and it was being seen as a very deadly attack. Now, we're now understanding that the situation has been largely doused. But what do you make of the situation? Do you think there was an attempt to attack in a very similar fashion to what we saw back in March?
Thank you very much. You see, what Russia is actually aiming at is two things. Trying to have an impact on the economy of Ukraine, because the railway line and all the energy centers is the lifeline of the Ukrainians. If you look at the railway network circuit, they have been planned in Ukraine. Uh, you know, it has a very, very large impact. And as you rightly said, that what happened in March, a similar kind of an exercise has been carried out by the Russians now. Now, you know, how does this actually impact is if you look at the location of Kirvohared, it is right in the central part of Ukraine. On the north is Kharkiv, on the east is Zaporozhye. On the south is Mykolaiv and Odessa. So you are seeing this battle is being fought in this region. So what the Russians have done is, Russians have ensured that the logistics supply, the ammunition, the military supply chain is going to be affected, because I am given to understand that almost 44 of these settlements all along these entire areas have been affected by this breakdown of the power supply. Uh, uh, Let me also tell you that since the war has started, 10,000 kilometers of railway track has been destroyed by the Russians, 43 substation buildings, and 126 terminals. So almost 23% of the rail infrastructure of Ukraine has been damaged by the Russians. Russians understand if Ukraine has to be brought to the table for a discussion, because right now Zelensky is trying to give a battle, is not laying down his arms as such, in spite of Trump's pressure on Zelensky. And Zelensky today has the support of the European Union, because they are instigating him to keep on fighting the battle and not surrender.
Right.
So if this happens to Ukraine now, this logistic pipeline has been badly damaged now. It will take them months to repair it, though 20 locomotives have been pressed into action as a stopgap arrangement, but I don't think they are going to be sufficient enough to sustain this battle for the Ukrainians, because the
Okay.
way Russians are fighting in western part of Donetsk and Kharkiv and Kherson, all these areas are under attack today. So I don't think Ukrainians have much of a capability to thwart these attacks, and their air defense, especially my last point is, we must understand the air defense of a country has to be very strong. The lessons India also has learned from Operation Sindoor is that you must have a robust air defense system.
Right.
So these drones are being allowed to enter Ukraine without any countermeasures. So I think a time to for Zelensky to think about these things, try to pick up his mind to have a communication with Putin, because unless he does that, I see further destruction of Ukraine.
Absolutely. So I request you to stay on with us as we shift our focus to some more news that we are tracking. Well, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that EU will propose speeding up the phase out of Russian fossil imports. She made this remark after a call with US President Donald Trump, who has pushed Europe to stop buying Russian energy and to impose tariffs on China and India, the biggest buyers of Russian oil. Von der Leyen confirmed that the EU executive will represent its 19th package of sanctions on Russia since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, including measures targeting crypto, banks and energy. She said Russia's war economy is being funded by fossil revenues and that ending these imports is essential to halt the bloodshed. The EU had previously planned to end Russian oil and gas purchases by the end of 2027, but Brussels is now seeking to move faster. Still with us on the broadcast is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. So I'd like to understand from you, with the latest developments that are kicking in, would you say that US President Donald Trump has been able to convince the EU to back his plan? And then if that's correct, what does that essentially then mean for countries like China and India?
To some extent, I would tend to believe that the European Union is now following what President Trump has been trying to say all these times, to exert economic pressure on Russia in terms of sanctions, in terms of a boycott of its products. But the ground reality is that today the European Union themselves are not very united. And if I can give you an example of Hungary and Slovakia, these are the two countries which are today also their 70 to 80% of their oil and energy requirements are coming from Russia. You need to understand, I think the viewers also need to understand two important things. One is national interest and the other economic power. Uh, Most of these European countries do not have strong and robust economies. They are dependent on Russian energy for a very long time, decades to decades. Switching over from Russia to other sources of supply, or if we take the United States also, which may come forward to give them their energy requirements, it's going to be 3 times the cost. So, will their economy be able to sustain this cost is one important aspect. And if President Trump wants it to happen, then he needs to subsidize his energy supplies to the European countries and to tell them that, okay, I'm prepared to take some losses. I will actually buffer up the things for you, and you stop buying oil and your gas requirements from Russia. And one important point is winters are approaching now. You see,
Yes.
now is a very, very crucial time for the European countries, because we are aware of the energy and power requirements of the European countries in winter months. So I don't think many of these European countries are going to take an immediate decision. Maybe some kind of discussions will take place, but what will actually remain is that from where are they going to get alternative sources of supply? It is very, very easy to say that, okay, stop this, stop that. But do you have alternatives available? That is the important aspect I actually visualize when we talk of European Union coming together in consonance what President Trump is trying to tell them to do.
Right, absolutely. I request you to stay on with us as we shift our focus to some more news that's coming in. President Vladimir Putin has made a surprise visit to Russia's Zapad joint military drills with Belarus on its last day. Putin has said that 25 foreign delegations have participated in the strategic exercise. Putin has also said that 100,000 troops have taken part in the drills. Listen in.
Для участия в мероприятиях учения 2025 прибыло 25 иностранных делегаций, из них 16 государств направили представителей, а 6 прислали воинские контингенты для участия в мероприятиях в рамках стратегического. Мероприятия проходят на 41 полигоне. Участие принимают 100 тысяч военнослужащих. Задействовано будет, и уже задействуется, около 10 тысяч систем вооружения, техники.
Kremlin has also said that Iran, India and other Russian allies from Asia and Africa had joined the Russia-Belarus joint drills. Earlier, US officers also made a surprise visit to the drills. The Belarus Defense Ministry has said that the drills were observed by representatives of 23 countries, including 3 NATO members, US, Turkey and Hungary. Russia and Belarus began the Zapad 2025 exercise at training grounds in both countries on September 12th. The exercises have concluded on September 16th. The Russian Defense Ministry has said that Zapad joint strategic exercise aims to improve military command and coordination in the event of an attack on either Russia or Belarus. Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar is still with us on the broadcast. Sir, over to you to help us understand what do you make of these joint exercises that are taking place.
Very interesting, because you see the timing is very important. The timing and this, if it was a joint exercises are normally a routine affair, which happens with all countries. India also takes part with Russian army or the US army. But the timing of this present exercise is also coinciding with the exercises being conducted by the NATO countries. In Poland and Romania, we have seen a few days back a similar kind of exercise was being done by the NATO nations, trying to test their interoperability in case of event of a war with Russia. So for Russia to be doing this exercise at this point of time, and especially with the 23 countries as you mentioned, is a very important strategic signaling to the NATO countries that we are also ready. We are also properly tasked, and we know exactly to do what to do in case event of NATO trying to plan any kind of a misadventure against the Russians. And you see, one important aspect, as we are now seeing the closeness of this a counterbalance force to the United States. We are seeing China aligning with Russia. We are seeing Iran also coming into, and for the first time, we are seeing Pakistan being invited as an observer state. So all these alignments are also very important to notice and important to understand that why these countries are aligning with the Russian bloc as a counter to the US influence. And this Zapad exercise, one more important aspect which has to be understood of this Zapad exercise is the nuclear dimension, because this exercise is focusing on nuclear scenarios and how the armies need to cope up in terms of offensive and defensive capability. So I think this is a strong messaging, signaling being done by Russia
Right.
to America and to the NATO countries in carrying out this exercise at this point of time.
All right, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us on NewsX World, sharing your perspectives with us. Meanwhile, we have some breaking news coming in. According to reports by local Russian media, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Sergei Ryabkov has said that Russia is ready to deepen discussions with the United States on energy cooperation, including the Sakhalin-1 project. He has also mentioned that Russia is in the ongoing contact with the United States on various issues, emphasizing that dialogue between the two countries continues. All right, we leave it there and shift our focus to some other news that we are tracking. US President Donald Trump called Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to wish him a happy 75th birthday, praising Modi for the tremendous job he has been doing. Trump expressed gratitude for Modi's support in efforts to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Narendra Modi responded warmly on social media, thanking Trump for his call and reaffirming his commitment to strengthening the India-US comprehensive and global partnership. Earlier, Trump admitted imposing 50% tariffs on India over its Russian oil purchases, strained ties, but defended the move, calling it necessary. The call comes amid renewed trade talks between India and the US after weeks of tension over tariffs. Both sides described the discussions as positive and forward-looking, aiming to reach a mutually beneficial trade agreement. Dr. Ajay Dua, former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, joins us from New Delhi, India. So thank you so much for your time on NewsX World. And I'd like to understand from you, how soon can the United States and India strike a win-win trade deal?
Thank you very much, Asavri. You know, all trade deals have to be win-win. They cannot be thrust upon anybody who's losing on the whole. You might lose in an item or two, but you also gain somewhere. Only then you do these deals, which are entirely voluntary. The bilateral deals, as well as multilateral deals, are left to the stakeholders to take a call. Having said that, I would say that all the signs which have come about in the last couple of weeks, particularly from the White House, have been positive, and India has very appropriately responded to it. All the overtures from President Trump have been acknowledged and reciprocated by Prime Minister Modi. At the lower levels, unfortunately, the White House staff assisting the president has not been so cooperative, if I could say, use that word, and instead they have for a while remained on another platform altogether of going on fighting faults with India and hoping that they might be able to browbeat the Indian team, negotiating team, or the Indian political leaders. That's not happened. So I do hope now that will be de-escalated, so to say, that now everybody in the US team would be on board with what their president desires. And the president yesterday, reportedly, when he had called up the Prime Minister to wish him on his 75th birthday, seems to have been positive about going forward, confirming what the negotiating team yesterday, which spent the whole day with their counterparts in India, said at the end of it that we've had positive talks. Now I'm hoping, Asavri, that what was delayed, the negotiations on 25th of August, which were abruptly cancelled by the United States, those we would take off from there, and that the negotiations, the sixth round of it, gets held within a week or so, whether in the US or India, that's immaterial, but it was agreed to be in India on the 25th of August. Having said that, I am not saying that a full-fledged deal covering every item of merchandise or service will be negotiated amicably. That could take time. So what I'm hoping for is that certain low-hanging fruits, what is also called early harvest in economics, or in commerce terms, could be settled in the fall, which stretches up to November, that we have 2 months to go. We would have items on which agreement is there, signed and delivered, and on others we continue to negotiate, appreciating each other's constraints of having had to call some of them red lines. They are red lines both from both the sides and not just ours. Ours are more in the, as you know, in the primary industries, agriculture, dairy, fishery.
Dr. Dua, appreciate you taking out time, speaking to us on NewsX World, sharing your perspectives. All right, we'll leave it there and shift our focus to some other news that we are tracking. Now, China on Wednesday called the framework deal reached in Madrid to switch video app TikTok to US-controlled ownership a win-win, and said it would review TikTok's technology exports and intellectual property licensing. Investors on both sides are now waiting for a call scheduled between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday, in which the agreement would be confirmed. Progress on the popular social media app TikTok, with over 170 million users in the US, is seen as a crucial step for moving trade talks forward. And in fact, as the world's two biggest economies look to build on their current tariff truce. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Luing, joining us from China. So thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX. NewsX World. I'd like to understand from you, what exactly do you believe will be the fate of TikTok?
I'm speaking from Hong Kong, okay, of course, a part of China. Now, you've got to understand the latest dynamics. TikTok, of course, is extremely popular, not only in the United States, but in many parts of the world, in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, all countries. And of course, there is a TikTok equivalent at the start on mainland China, which is called Douyin, and owned by the same company called ByteDance, which owns the intellectual property of the algorithms. Now, this so-called framework agreement, the deadlines are still to be, the details are still to be revealed, but it's significant that President Trump only yesterday announced a further extension of the deadline on TikTok, suggesting that the final deal is not that easy, which also means that China is unlikely to give up its intellectual property over the entire TikTok ecosystem, not not only in the United States, but the rest of the world. So I think that the details are still to be reviewed and discussed, and the likely scenario is that the security data of TikTok, which worries the Trump administration, is likely to be allowed to be ring-fenced by American security measures, including perhaps ownership by American company, without the TikTok parent company giving up its intellectual property. But yet the deal is yet to be sealed, pending direct talk between President Trump and President Xi. And of course, TikTok is not the only game that defines the rivalry between these two great powers. It is also Americans' stranglehold on China's semiconductor industry and various trade tariffs. So, these are the multifaceted dynamics that have got to be understood in the current discussions.
All right. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us on NewsX World, sharing your perspectives. Well, this is all the time that we have for you. We will continue to bring you more updates from around the world. Stay tuned.